everybody. You can hear John, but I cannot.
Hi, guys.
So I'm in a beautifully cool new setup that is building on that new style of video that we were doing. And it's this great thing, but we're in separate rooms temporarily. So John can hear you and John can hear me, but I can't hear John. So that should be interesting. If he's quiet or kind of hanging in the background, it's so I don't look ridiculous talking over him. Today should be a lot of fun. It's going to be about 37 minutes. I hope you guys saw that graphic about how you can do a round canvas if you don't have a round. Feel free to share your results, your work in progress, both in the Patron group and in the Art Sherpa official, because you guys have privileges. All right, you guys ready to jump on in? Let's begin. The background. Green world. Ooh. You made me small? I'm small now. All right, so we have painted in our sky, and that's really great. We still have our ultramarine, burnt sienna, and phthalo blue out. Now, for landscaping, I'm going to want to add a cool green and a warm green, which you guys know in our particular palette is the tight knit yellow and the cad yellow. I'm just putting out some titanium white there. I'm going to be using two whites, titanium white and zinc white. And that's because I'll want to have transparent whites and opaque whites. Ooh, phthalo green. And then John is in here, walking in here, reminding me he can walk around. Free. So you see me taking a little bit of my ultramarine and burnt sienna and some of my phthalo blue with that. That's the number 12 Princeton round. I even got into got phthalo, got burnt sienna, got all the greens. So I'm going to be stippling this up and down. If you haven't done this with one of these brushes, you'll feel like, where has this been all my life? Honestly, when you're trying to make tree shapes, it's like the brush was like begging to make tree shapes. And it was really funny. I was watching a bunch of Instagram videos where the different little crazy hack channels were doing things. That's the burnt sienna and the phthalo green, just loading up. Brush is fairly dry. And they were taking these really cheap brushes and like taping them together to make their little trees. And I was like, oh, I have a brush that's already that shape. I don't got to tape anything. And then I went to use it and I was like, this is my favorite tree brush now. The rest of the community doesn't know about this. But the real trick about this is not letting the brush get too wet and stippling it up and down. Remember to try to make sure that your trees are uneven and look natural. Also, in this case, you guys have in your dashboards the stages, the references. Use those to help guide your shapes and directions so you can really see it. You could blow it up. You can zoom into it. Sometimes it's nice to have on your phone. I'm going to bring this deep green forward. I see you, John, walking around. No hands. He didn't show you his hands. I'm going to come back forward. So I'm just trying to create a really deep value. Now, I was just talking to another Sherpette about what to do about these deep values in the background. And interestingly enough, this particular leg of the lesson is going to answer how to fix that painting perfectly. And I know that she's here right now, but I didn't want to out her. So, but she asked me that question, and this is the lesson that explains that, because we're going to be doing this exact thing. Now, the first thing that I'm doing to make sure that my background trees look like trees is keeping that edge very up and down, up and down, up and down. I've rinsed out my brush. I've dried it off. I put it to the side. I'm going to put out my warm yellow, which is my cad yellow. And I'm going to put out some yellow ochre. Yellow ochre is also a warm yellow, great to use for these. And I'm going to put out, I do believe, if I remember totally correctly, and I should, eventually I'm going to put out my tight knit yellow. It's that light Naples yellow. So I'm taking my phthalo green and my yellow ochre. If you guys are familiar with this, it makes kind of a creamy sage color. I add a little bit of cad to it, and I'm going to take a number 4 round, and I'm going to just fuss with the tops of things. Apparently, I've decided to get something else for reasons I don't know. Probably I'm adjusting my reference. That's what I often do. It really helps to be able to see things when you blow them up or look at them. So this part of this is really defining the delicate elements of these distant trees using the toe of the number 4. I'm stippling up and down, and I'm the value now that I'm using is just slightly lighter than the dark background. So we're beginning to build up the diffused effect of distant trees. And some of how that's happening is that the greens are not so bright. They're bright. They're going to be increasing in value, lightening in value, but they won't be bright and saturated. So that'll help keep them in the background. You'll notice that I'm stippling the brush and I'm creating little banks and areas of the tree. I try to put myself in the mind of seeing the way the tree grows and is built and bring that forward. Now, in the foreground here, I'm taking that mix of I'm adding some cad yellow and titanium white, and I'm lightening the green. I still have the yellow ochre and phthalo on there. When I'm lightening green, and I've been saying this a lot in class, but I can't really stress it enough, that's the burnt sienna and the phthalo green. I can't really say enough. You've got to lighten your greens with yellow first and then add white. Anytime that you just add white into your greens, you get mint, unless you use a zinc, which will be out. I still have a little bit of glaze here, and I'm sure I'm going to be using it throughout the painting. You can see me going back and forth between my deep value, creating the structure and elemental shapes of the trees, and then coming back with my lighter green values in the yellow ochre and phthalo, and in the yellow ochre, phthalo, cad yellow, and white to create elements of tree shape. Because where we create those highlights, that's where we get the tree shape. See how I'm piecing out the leaves though? So coming out from the clustered shape of the tree, I now have little delicate leaves that are defined by the number 4 round. And you can get even fussier than this. If you just want to be all day, you can get a detail like a monogram liner and just do little tiny dots per hours just on that little background thing. And it will just bring it closer into that photographic feel. You can see me adding subtle but very important highlight to the foreground of the background, to that flat area of the earth under the trees, and then also within the trees themselves. This is creating shape. Tip, it's really important to keep in mind that unless there's a light source that causes this to be different, like a really strange, unusual light source, underneath your tree should be fairly dark. And then as the ground moves forward, it will become lighter. If you take a very light green down to the bottom of your tree will cease to look like it exists above the ground. So it's important to keep in mind that there has to be a deep value there. I don't want this green to be too bright. That wouldn't be a good idea for anything at all. Hi, Patty. And I definitely want to make sure it's knocked back enough. And again, I haven't rinsed out the brush from even a little bit of burnt sienna. So everything is just a little desaturated. But I am coming in, piecing in. You can see these delicate elements of the tree now. And when you think how small of an area that we've kind of painted for this segment, you realize that we're really relaxing into the space and painting more elements and more details than we traditionally do. You can see me going into the yellow ochre, again, to create lightness. And sometimes I'll change between my yellows because it's a good idea to have a different green. Trees are not uniform across every tree. There are different varietals of trees. And so they will all be green, but maybe they are slightly different hues of green. Having different greens or different yellows or different blues to work that out can be enough to get you some subtle differences while still working those values, because when you're painting green on green, it is the value, the green value of the painting that is really critical. Barbara Reyes says, did everyone get their sky painted? I've been practicing, but I've not painted it on my round canvas. I'd love to hear that Barbara Reyes has been practicing. Oh, I put out Indian yellow and I put out Titanite yellow. So I have said all the yellow. All of them. And if you have a cad yellow light, I would put that out too. It's really that helpful. Just be able to change up, and especially in distance, say this tree is a little bit of a different variety than this other tree, while, you know, just trying to create the shapes with the value. It's in a lovely play. When you see the painting in person, it's just stunning. And I was really glad to be able to offer this to you guys, you know, in the way that we did. It's a long piece, but I think you will be pleased, pleased, pleased with the result. And I was so pleased when I saw the Victorian frames, knowing that you guys would be able to hang this on your wall. I'm going to get a frame for mine in the convex glass, and I will we'll get a picture of it somewhere in the house and let you guys see how that looks. You can see I'm lightening with the yellow and then getting the white involved. So that's that subtle adjustment. I see beginners do that all the time where they want to lighten it with just the white. They want to tint it, and they forget they've got to really lift it first with the yellow. I think there's probably a hairdresser analogy that goes with this. Linda Sue says, used to paint with Bob Ross and Bill Alexander, and one technique was to pull the trees down with a palette brush into the water for that reflection. Would that work with acrylic? So this is really interesting, Linda. Almost all of the techniques work with acrylic as long as you can keep the acrylic from drying. We have a bunch of techniques and medias that let us do that. And I can really paint any of those oil paintings in acrylic without any difficulty because I'm pretty familiar with those. I'm making little upward strokes. They're very textural. You can see I'm leaving deep values between the little tiny grasses that I'm painting. I'm going back now heavily into my ultramarine blue and my burnt sienna, and this makes a gray. And you can really see it into the white. It makes a very distinctive gray. I add the glazing medium to improve flow. And we can do that sometime. We can do another Bob Ross painting in the patronage with acrylic, or Bob Ross style anyway. So I'm adding some highlights to the stream edge, some stones, the beginnings of landscape elements that you might find. Now, they haven't actually be in this particular landscape, but even if you were painting from imagination, you would always want to add some type of texture that breaks up your green line. I'm back into my fabulously wonderful fun brush, and now I'm breaking that interesting rule, which is I really didn't put as much yellow into that phthalo green, and then I added some white, which minted it out, and then came back with yellow. But as you can see with the number 12 Princeton round blender, that's giving me some really terrific bush texture. And by kind of changing that up a bit, doesn't that kind of like give the effect of, well, this bush is a little bit fluffy this way, and this bush is a little bit stiff this way. So it's really wonderful. And I'll just have to sit Lyndon down, and we'll just have a fun day where we do that. All right, so I'm back into my ultramarine and my white, and you can see that I'm getting some blue going again. You want to have your sky, when you're doing this type of painting, color ready all the time, because your water is often either a very dark version of your sky or a light version of your sky. It's a mirror of what's above it. So keeping those colors handy is super important. I'm varying how light and dark the color is. I'm going to want to have it darker closer to the riverbank. As you can see, there's like an interesting dark line is beginning to reveal itself. I'm moving back and forth. This is a number 4 Cambridge. It's just because it's giving me a nice soft blend. I really like the mix of hog and the synthetic. Sit me where? Oh, I don't know, somewhere in the studio, and we'll do it. Oh, thank you, Kim, for the frame I mentioned. So just going back and forth. And now I'm using this wonderful little brush, and I'm kind of trying to create little variances in the water. This back part of the landscape, the water is slightly choppy and energetic. It's in motion, and when water is in motion, you will see more of the white and variance in the color, just to delineate that, because you start to get the chop in the foam. I can't hear John, so I'm going to tell him I love him. I'm coming with a very dark color again. I'm taking my burnt sienna and my ultramarine, and I'm enforcing that dark line along the riverbank. Often we see those lines because the way the bank shades the water, and then also there's often dark soil there. In this particular case, it was a combination of both. So that worked out well for me. And here I come along on the toe of my brush, going back and forth, doing those things. This was a really nice painting for me. I'm getting into my yellow now, and my green, really bright, and my white. Now I have something that's going to really show, and that means I'm trying to focus some attention, some powerful attention to a few little elements. how I'm controlling how that saturates and pulls forward in my world is that I am not using a lot of it. And I'm coming back, I added some phthalo blue. Again, working that riverbank, trying to say, hey, there's a little shadow here. And of course, like as the trees come forward and everything, they also add shadow into the riverbank. All right. So I'm going in, getting my burnt sienna and my phthalo green. And I'm adding those colors a little bit into the water because you've got, again, your trees, those objects, they are reflected in the water. The water catches that color and puts it out there. It's one of the reasons I really love to paint water. I'm very excited about those bears in Alaska right now because they're a really great reference of, I think they're bear Otis or something, getting some salmon in the water. And I just love the color of the water. So again, you'll notice that even though I'm in the number 4 round and I'm making little choppy marks, I'm really talking about energetic water. I'm positioning my brush and I'm going to make some distant stones. I'm using my ultramarine and burnt sienna to make a gray. Now I'm getting a little of my zinc white into it. I want to lighten it, but I don't want to change it too much. I just want to create some distant value, and then I will pop it with some titanium. But right now I want to see the depth of the rock. That helps my eye register what it is in the distance. Donna Cox, the amount of work Simon puts in every day to get resources available and mine is boggling. She's the best. So I'm back into my Indian yellow and I'm adding my white. With these colors, what you get is a really lovely green gold. Green gold is terrific in landscape painting, so it's wonderful to have around to be able to pull a reliable green gold. You can get a green gold also with ultramarine and cad yellow. If you ever did your color chart, those green golds are maybe not what we want to paint in really saturated paintings, but wonderful if you're doing any naturalistic painting. Again, you can see me capturing these pops of light value, right? Touching it in. It's a pop of light value. And then if I have to come back with a little bit of dark value, I do. Those little touches. Look how much little, like, out of nowhere of this little background, we got a little bit of a river and a little bit of bushes from just a lot of little tap, 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 tap. I can use my burnt sienna and my ultramarine as a chromatic black. That's a black that isn't black by pigment, it's black by value into the eye. And as you can see, as I push those shadows in, what did we talk about, the shadows in the trees? That's how we start to see the foreground being very separate from the trees behind it. So the embankment that comes forward begins to pull away from the trees. Now, on our Zoom meeting, remember, if you send your painting in to support at TheArtSherpa.com as per the instructions in your newsletter, you can get some feedback on how you can get your paintings to the next level. And you can absolutely bring the landscapes from this class to that as well. Help you get there. I am using my number 4 round and my sky color, and I'm breaking up, if you'll notice, the green that I put in earlier. And I'm doing that because the way the water is energetic, the way that it's flowing, it's not a completely smooth surface. And whenever we're painting any type of moving water, there is always a break, a kind of like dark side, light side in the reflection of the flow. It's good to get light values coming up and every once in a while pull a dark value coming in. I love seeing the chat going today. So my burnt sienna, a little of my green, and my cad yellow. It's a great way to get distant trees going. And I'm doing a bit of I want to create a tree that's a little more formed and is coming up. I don't want to say it's like a pine per se in any way, or a poplar or anything, but it's a more vertically structured tree. When you look anywhere that you have any kind of deciduous forest or different kind of mixed forest, you can see a lot of variance in the foliage and the types of trees that are out there. And it's kind of fun to pay attention to the way that the structures are different from each other. Even in the background, we can be attentive. We could do this loosely, or we can come in and do this in this very kind of methodical, considered way. You can see me defining individual branches here. These skills in the background are skills that we're just going to continue to carry forward in more detail as we move into the middle ground of the painting. But again, we're just rocking the background. All right. Da, 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 da. Oh my goodness. Everybody is being too nice to me. I can't take it. Thank you so much. I've gotten into my nickel titanite yellow and my cad yellow. My cad yellow keeps the nickel titanite yellow from being a little too much in the space. And the green of the titanite yellow or Naples yellow light if you're painting with a Sennelier paint. Oh, Linda's talking about black Fabriano. Always good. Super good. You can see my faces. My words are still there. I'm not going to use that particular graphite marker anymore. We're done. We broke up. I'm taking a white charcoal pencil and I'm just giving myself a light line to understand where a slightly more forward bank is. I'm bringing a lighter green forward. That was from the Indian yellow version of it. Now you can really see what a green gold it is. I'm using a little pulling motion. It's creating a distant, far off grass texture, right? Because I'm not smoothing and it's rough, but they're not really long grasses at this point. They're kind of short. I'm adding some deep value as I'm coming back, adding more phthalo green in and breaking up that light shape. So you can see the peninsula is lighter and then we're coming back into a darker value. Coming back, and all of a sudden that weird spearhead of blue to the right begins to look even more like a bank in relationship to this slightly more forward embankment. It's the object layering in the art that creates this illusion. I've got my burnt sienna into my, I've added cad red into my yellow. And I can't tell you how nice it is to get a little bit of an orange play into your landscape. It's super powerful. When you do it, making different variants of orange and then working that in, because that talks about the dryness of grass and all that. Tips for long-handled brushes while seeding. Don't poke yourself in the eye. They're problematic. You have to get a natural sense for getting out of their way because you really can poke yourself in the eye with them, which is why artists sitting at a table don't use them. I do tend to sit upright into the painting, and then if I get leaned forward, I will kind of lean out of the way. So this particular mix that we're coming over here, we've got our darker green, and I'm making a tree that's coming up and a little more forward. It's a similar tree to the one behind it a bit in its vertical structure, adding a little bit of a light value, just trying to keep that. Whenever I want to deepen it, what do? I get my burnt sienna and my phthalo green. And notice the motion of that stroke, the little kind of vigorous up and down motion of the stroke. So there's a lot of energy into how we're applying paint into the canvas. Very energetic, which I think is slightly therapeutic. So, oh my goodness, look at everybody saying hi. It's such a nice community. So I got back into that cerulean that I have, and I'm adding some of my titanium white. And I just am coming back. And what I'm going to do here is give myself just a little peek between the leaves. Sometimes you want to come back and give yourself almost like a little peek between the leaves. You can get painting and objects will become too solid. There was a landscape instructor that said you've got to leave room for birds to fly through, and I always thought that was really wonderful. That's the burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, and phthalo green into the brush. You can see it's giving me a very rich, deep green. Ultramarine and phthalo green makes much more of a teal than a turquoise, and it's kind of nice to have around when you're doing any kind of landscape painting. I can't even really imagine not having an ultramarine available on landscape painting, and it's always funny to me when artists are like, you can't do ultramarine. It can be hard to get good color mixes, but that's just about understanding that there's a red value in that paint. Linda Sue says, I live with a teenager. I can roll my eyes and keep walking now. I've been practicing. But you want to roll them out of the way, those long handles. I've gone back into the white, and that's the zinc. When I want to make a subtle uplift, I'm going to go into my zinc. when I want to make a startling lift up in value, I'm going to go into my titanium. Now I'm just creating some value in that tree, some structure in that tree. Into the cad yellow, I'm lightening my green. Lighten up. I think I must want to lighten it a little bit, but not so much. And we're going to be making little dotting motion. This is catching little bits of texture. These are, imagine that the leaves are like large disco ball glitter, and when they shift, they reflect light or light shines through them. And the whole thing is like that. You know, there's like dresses that have the big circular glitters. It's like that in a tree. And so what you're really capturing is those leaves in motion. So when you're thinking, oh, I'm painting a highlight, what you're really painting is the leaf in motion. The wind is going through it. The sunlight is going through it. It is turning and either reflecting or it is being lit up, illuminated from behind. I'm just saying, doing a really cool thing when you're painting these little yellow dots. And sometimes your mindset can make that work easier. If you're like imagining, I like to hear the wind go through the trees, and I like to imagine the light hitting it. That is Mars Black. And I know my head's kind of over the red here, which is, as we've been doing this, we've been making adjustments to like our table setup. So back into that gray mixture. And here I have black. So you would think, wouldn't I want to use the black and white to make that? But I find sometimes it's nice to use colors that I've incorporated throughout the painting to create a unity in the structure. You know, there ought to be unity somewhere in our world, right? It might as well be in our painting. I have so little, thank you, baby. I have so little control in my universe, right? I don't have control over world events or the news or what anyone's doing, but I do have a lot of control over what's happening in my painting. I don't even have control over kids, but I have control over what's happening in my painting. I'm making little bits of visible tree trunks that you can kind of see. So these are little bits of the trunk that are showing through the leaves. If you think about trees, they cover up a lot of the trunk, but certain types of trees will show a bit of the trunk and have patches or clouds or levels of leaves that go. And when you put the trunks in, doesn't it just really start to form the space? And it's, again, a lot of considered work for your most distant elements. Sometimes in a piece, it's these minor moments in relationship to the big focal element of your painting, which in this case will be the forward grass, that really makes a difference. Again, coming back with the light green and making sure that my trees have a broken up feeling and that the values up where the tree might be getting some light. You're thinking about the light source all the time through here. Always have to think about your light source. The light source in your heart and the light source on your canvas. Little upward motion. Very therapeutic. I'm not tell you how much. This was just a joy to work on. These little motions that we make in the painting, these little textures, these little events, I believe are almost a meditative act for the artist. I think that's why we lose sense of time. Oh, I'm back into my number 12 Princeton round. I'm getting into a light green, and I am doing a touch pull stroke with this brush. Kind of creates a bush shape. It's really wonderful. It especially in the distance, they're a little diffused. I get into that cad red, and make some more of these shapes, and it does really kind of illuminate. Get into a dark ultramarine, and what does that do? That gives me some shadows in those bush textures. You're building it forward, and you're saying, hey, there's some highlights, guys, and these are great. I haven't even rinsed. And then back into the yellow to lighten. I tap the shape of the brush, and the roughness of the bristles starts to create the bushes. All right, everyone looks good. So we're all doing really, really well. I cannot wait to see your versions. Can't wait to see how you guys are doing. Aren't those bushes? Didn't they just come out of nowhere? They're just there. Oh, some deep phthalo green. Definitely need some of that. Let's put some of that in there. A little more because we can. And we integrate it into the ground there because we know that everything sort of grows in and weaves in with each other, and we're comfortable with that, and we feel good about that. We know shadows are important, and in painting art, the shadows are important. In life, the shadows are hard to take, but in painting, they're so essential because it's what defines the light, right? So maybe that's a way to look about things in the world right now, is like it is the shadows that help define the light in us. I'm going to come along and help kind of add some like forward. These are little rocks, little embankment elements, things that are kind of breaking in from the little peninsula. I'm getting a darker value. Imagine maybe adding some of those shadows. Oh, black. I'm serious now. Whenever I get black, I'm serious. I'm gonna give it a shadow. And you look, they're just rocks come out of nowhere, don't pop up. It is the shadows that define the light, and the light defines the shadows. That we cannot live without them. We need both. Other than that, we have Rothko. So, well, a lot of people do. It's worth millions of dollars, but you know what I mean. Again, I'm creating a deeper shadow along this space, and then I'm adding some reflections. This is about some very shaded embankment in front of there, and then those little highlights are where like maybe some water caught a little reflection. Melinda's saying her studio is partially moved. She's so much more put together than the rest of us. It's like already almost there. Adding a little white to my brush. And I'm like really serious. This is really together person. Do not let her fool you. So I'm adding a little reflection. And I'm coming along. And got a little green into that mix because it is nice to touch some of these colors and we think about it. You'll see me back away with the brush and I'll be like, oh, I'm thinking about it. And here what I'm adding is the reflections of the rock into the water. Thinking about how these rocks impact the water coming forward. And I'm really deciding here, I'm getting some burnt sienna and some phthalo and my number 4 cambric, right? And a little yellow ochre. What am I doing? I'm going to come here and start to add this very important green downward reflection. Now, this section of the river momentarily until tomorrow, till next Monday, will look a little odd. It looks like we painted a strange triangle, but this is really an important part of the painting. So try to be seated in it, try to enjoy it, try to make that time with it great. I'm just stumbling my little brush along. I used the Frederick's Economy canvases. One of my friends and moderators had gotten me some. I'm getting my Indian yellow and a little of my white. This is going to be a reflection color. And she had sent these to me to do around, and I like them. I've been doing projects on them since. And I think there's some better, beautiful convex canvases and other interesting canvases. But other than the rough texture, which I'm negotiating here, I actually like these just fine. They're just like a cardboard with a coating. They work really well. This is the reflection coming down. Again, we added that highlight and a bit of that sky tone to it, but slightly greened. Into the yellow and zinc white we go. Pull forward some more of that lighter reflection. Reflections are either very crisp mirrors of what's above them, or because the water is energetic or the surface is energetic, they're slightly diffused or broken up images of what's above. And sometimes they are more distant from the object than you might expect. Like this reflection is about trees that are even further back sometimes. So it's an interesting thing to see. Take a minute if you live near a river or body of water and watch how the reflections change for the weather, the wind factors, the chop, all those things. Back into my basic sky color. And if you remember, this is the cerulean blue, and I have some ultramarine phthalo and burnt sienna. So these are neutralizing sky colors. These brushstrokes are going back and forth, titanium white in the cerulean. I will be adding very light values and very deep values as we come forward and add different parts of the river. So in the river, as it's flowing, parts of the river will be very energetic, in motion, choppy. And then other parts of the river will be smoother, but maybe they're shielded from the wind. Maybe it's a particularly deep part of the river, and so it slows down a great deal and becomes glossy. So this is really fun to play with. And continue to get some white in there. And another thing that's really great about the number 4 Cambridge is the brush is kind of like, hey, right? It's just, it is fog and it's been well used. I'm using my deep green and my yellow ochre. It's been well used and it definitely has some stuff going on. But when you tap it up and down into the paint, it creates a texture that for all the world looks like rippled water. I'm playing with some very gentle, delicate little downward reflections, right? Pulling them into the wet. Where they go into the wet, what do? They blend. What they do. I got it. She's in the paint zone, says Amanda Blex. How is Amanda? How you doing? Did I miss a question? No, I didn't. I'm almost done. So I'm almost done. Well, that time has just flown by. I'm getting into the cerulean. I do have green in my brush still. I'll get into my titanium white, and I'm going to continue to pull in. Do you see this thing I do where I'm like, I'm gonna paint? It's an interesting thing that happens in the artist brain where your brain begins to work it out, but your hand's like ready to take the instructions, and it's almost like chomping at the bit. It reminds me of a horse that's ready to run. I'll pull in blue into this aqua. You'll see me go across and down to kind of break a smooth but not glossy kind of effect on the water. Come along here and paint that in, work that into the rough canvas. A little deeper into the cerulean. I know I want to get that in. And when you use these rougher brushes, you can really push the paint around. I added some water there, which is why it's a bit shinier. And I'm just strengthening the sense of this blue space. And down that comes around what is going to be another grassy embankment in the middle ground. So we're just painting the space. We're blending it in. We're creating a sense of this is this segment of the river. We haven't really dealt with the far left of it where a stronger run of trees is, and we haven't really started to address the far right that much. This is just a kind of background and middle zone. Notice that high reflection I put there. Things like that are very important. Paying attention to those highlights and then hitting those shadows and enjoying the fishies that John puts behind me are all about what it is. So I highly recommend these tools. I highly recommend the Cambridge set of tools. I highly get them on sale. I highly recommend that number 12 Princeton round blender. It's been really fantastic in the making of all kinds of painting textures. I probably will have a whole class on it itself at some point. It's just really, really wonderful. And that number 4 round and that stippling motion and those things. Now, next week, what are we doing? We're going to the middle ground. It's literally Middle Earth. That's just what I'm saying to you. It's Middle Earth. The middle. Okay. So it's true. I haven't offended anybody's brand. By then, John will probably be closer to me. I wish I could show you the craziness that's going on here. It's really quite magnificent. I'm getting a new table. I'm working on a new seating area. I got a little pillow for Twix. I got a footrest, which is really terrific. So there's a lot going on that is amazing. And this is happening, these equipment upgrades, these builds, all these things happen because of the support and patronage that we have. We couldn't do the show without you guys. So every time you're here, know that these classes are my big and heartfelt thank you to all of you. Be good to yourself. Especially right now, guys, it's really hard right now. So be really good to yourself. Take time to self-care. Be good to each other. Again, hard right now. So try to cut each other whatever slack you can handle cutting others because, wow, it's a difficult time. And Just want you to have a great week, and I want to see you next Monday for our next Green World class. Bye-bye.